Hello everyone, and you're probably gonna hear the dogs in the background because they're down playing. I got the gate across so they can't come up on the patio, but they can play down in the backyard. Also, my cup of tea. So, you might need one too if you've decided to click on this video and watch this series. This is my Dear Diary series. I've been wanting to do this series for a long time. Really long time, actually, years. I just didn't know how to go about it. I also wanted to mentally be more prepared for doing this, for opening up and letting myself become a little vulnerable with this type of series as well. I wanted to approach it and go about it in the right way. There was a lot of factors and things behind the scene that went into this. But anyway, here we are. This is just a series that I'm hoping could help other people. Like I said, you'll hear the dogs in the background. It is what it is. And the neighbor's lawnmower. I really like and wanted to do this series outdoors. I might have to wait. Okay. So, the whole reason I wanted to do this series, it's not only for myself and for my husband, but I guess I just really was hoping to just reach other people who were in similar situations, who experience similar types of things in life, and I don't know, just even if it connected to one person. I don't expect to, the whole wide world and change the world with your videos. Nothing like that. If it's just one single person that this can affect and help in a positive way, and I'm going positive way, I'm okay with that. And to me, that means everything. So this one today is my childhood, is where I'm going to start. Okay, deep breath. We're rewinding the tape back almost 25, 26, 27 years ago, like years ago. This was when my parents were together. We had such a wonderful first few years of my life. It was literally like the dollhouse. Do you guys remember in the 90s, the early 90s, that dollhouse that was like the two-story dream house, I guess you could say? It was like that. It had the little porch, the tree with the tire swing in the front yard, the little gravel walkway going up to the little porch that went into the two-story house. It was just such a dream. I had my mother who was baking in the kitchen, making bread. I still remember that. That's one of my first memories, actually, of my mother. She was in the kitchen going like this, making a loaf of bread. And then my first memory with my biological father was we were sitting at, and I actually mentioned this in a video only the other day, but we were sitting at the kitchen table. He dips his peanut butter toast in his tea, and right then and there I started to do it, and that was one of my first memories of my biological dad that I can recall and remember now. That was one of my first memories with my biological father, was dipping the peanut butter toast in the tea and having it, and he liked it and I liked it. So it was just wonderful. I remember going to my biological grandparents' house during lunch when I was only in kindergarten, and she would sit down and watch The Price is Right, and I'd sit down in the living room with one of those pizzas. It was mostly a pizza, or going there for breakfast before school to have toast and eggs, and she'd always do a boiled egg. It seemed like that was her go-to, was a boiled egg for breakfast with a slice of toast. And I just remember all these Disney books on her shelf, the old school Disney books, and I just remember the layout of her living room. It was literally a little bookshelf, and then there was a chair here that my grandfather would always sit in, and I'd always get up with him and their puppy Candy. And I just remember in their kitchen. I'd love sneaking chocolate chip cookies, and they were in a drawer, and I'd always just grab them out of the drawer and sneak it under the cupboard in the kitchen and eat the chocolate chip cookies. We used to go camping, and that was where my first memory and where I started to really fall in love with photography and videography was when we went camping, because somebody, I don't know if it was my biological dad or my grandparents, somebody gave me a camera that you had to put in the cooler for the pictures to develop. So once you took the picture, it'd show up black, and I'd have to put it in the cooler to get the picture to show up. That was my first experience with a camera, and I absolutely loved it. I loved every second and every moment of that, and it was just such a great memory. When we went camping, I can even remember the smells. I love rolling down the windows, even though it was a dirt road and some dust would come in from the dirt. I remember the smells from the trees as we were driving into where the camping site was, where it wasn't really a camping site, it's just where everyone put their campers and stuff too, and it just so happened that's where they stayed. But I just remember that. It was just a lot of fun, wonderful memories. And I remember too, we had a project and I taped apple seeds to it because there was a poem and there was just those on it, and I remember removing them and trying to plant them in the driveway hoping that an apple tree will form, because I don't know why I did it or thought that it would happen, but that's what I did. Especially in our climate and our weather where we live, there was no way an apple tree would grow like that quick. But I thought that planting these seeds, the apple tree would be there the very next day. Then on one side we had someone who had chickens, and they always grow fresh eggs. On the other side we had somebody who had horses, and I'm pretty sure they had cows too, but I definitely distinctly remember the horses because there was one time that the horses actually jumped out and it really scared my brother and my sister, and even like myself, I remember I got startled. But it was one of those moments, like, I wasn't overly scared though. I just was mesmerized and amazed that the horse jumped over it, and I think that's where I really started to fall in love with animals, was just how powerful and everything else those horses were, and just watching them. And I remember they come over to the fence and I was trying to pet them or feed them. And then I also remember up on the hill just on the other side of our house, they had different types of vegetables that they grow, especially peas. And I remember we used to always sneak in because we used to hang out with their niece, I think, because like I said, it was so long ago. But there was a little girl there, and I remember we used to sneak in and eat the peas out of the vegetable garden. I used to love snap peas or sugar peas, and they had those, and I'd always be eating them. They had this water bed, I remember, that we used to go in and jump on and stuff, just because we liked to sink in it. And, you know, it was that whole texture movement of it, the mattress, the water bed mattress. We just found it really cool as kids. What else? I also remember they had these binoculars I absolutely loved, and a telescope, and it was like very expensive, and I don't know, there was something about it I just loved. It was, like I said, it was such a great environment to grow up in. I absolutely loved every second of it. It was great. It was a great first few years of my life, because when kindergarten came around, that's when everything happened and started to go south. Time for a bit of tea. That's when my memory started to shift and change. It became a very dark time. I remember, if I can recall memories of my mother and my father when I was in kindergarten, it was few and far between. But my memories with my grandparents on my biological dad's side, I have a lot of. Even to this day, I still remember. I have more memories of them than my parents. I visually remember seeing them more than my parents. I spent a lot of time at my grandparents, a lot of time. there was a room on the front of my grandparents' house that I remember I used to always be really scared of, so my grandparents would actually tell me to come in with them or go in with my aunt. And my grandfather also had a room that he used to always make alcohol in, and I remember that smell very distinctly. And down in the kitchen, you'd always get the smell of cigarette smoke because my grandmother, she would smoke in the house and play cribbage with some of her older friends. And I remember that distinctly, but I just have so many memories of their house and being there and just the backyard and all the beautiful trees and colors and smells of all the trees and their front yard and their shed, and how I liked exploring in their shed all the time, even though I knew we shouldn't be in there, especially as young as I was, but I'd always be in there. But I just have so many distinct memories of all of that. But again, like I said, my parents, I don't have many. My mother did have some personal issues that she was dealing with, and so did my biological father. He also had personal issues. And we lived in a very small community. Very small. Like, even going to the post office, I remember my grandmother allowing me, I'd always ask, can I check the mail? Can I check the mail? And she'd always be like, okay. Or going to the store, I remember the 5-cent candies in this little castle, and my grandparents, especially my nan, a lot of memories with my nan. And I'd always ask her, can I have 10 cents to get like a bag of candy? Because you used to, for 10 cents, fill up the bag full of candy. But it was just, like I said, a small town, and everybody kind of knew each other. Like, the people at the corner store knew who we were, and the people at the church knew who we were. And it was just a very close-knit, small community. Kindergarten was interesting. You know how you usually start school and you kind of know the basics. You know your name, how to spell it, you know how to read. Well, when I not like read, but you knew the basic concept words like and it and I and you, your name, things that, you know, the alphabet even. Some kids just go in knowing just the alphabet. They don't know their name necessarily, but the alphabet or numbers. I knew none of that going into kindergarten. I was going into kindergarten literally not knowing a thing. Then we're going to jump now to grade 1, and I was just starting grade 1. And I remember getting called out of the class, and I got removed from the class, and I remember a distinct smell of a brand new pencil case with different stuff in it. I think it was Sailor Moon, and it had like a pencil and eraser in it, but I remember that smell. I remember distinctly the new smell of the pencil case. I was like, ooh, I was so excited, and just, of course, being a little kid. And she tells me this is my gift because I'm going away. And I was quite confused. I was like, what? She said, because where you're going away, I want you to have this and remember us. And where am I going? Is all I kept thinking in my head. Like, where am I going? And the next thing I know, my grandparents are packing me a bag, and I'm at the airport with my brother. Now, my sister wasn't there, and I'm not giving any names, so anyone I'm referring to is brother, sister, nan, pop, mother, father, this friend, that friend. None of these Dear Diary series are going to have names, just so you guys know, just for personal reasons. But anyway, I just remember my brother was there, but my sister wasn't. I remember getting on a plane. This was my first time ever on a plane, and I was getting upset and frustrated because my ears, I couldn't understand why my ears felt clogged, and my brother was sat next to me and he was kind of crying, and this random lady looks over at us and offers us gum, and she says, chew on this, it will help. And I remember doing that, and then getting off the plane. I don't know where from there, I can't remember that's all a blur, but I do remember it was sand the eyes could see. I knew we were going to see my dad, and he was in another province. This was when it was another province, because now technically they're joined, they're the same, but at the time they were separate provinces. And we left our island to go to the mainland on this plane to go see my dad. That I did know, and I was very excited because I knew my father worked away, so we didn't really see him all that much. So me going on a plane to see him, I was excited, but I was also confused, if that makes any sense. Because when I was hauled out of school and when my grandmother was packing my bag, I kind of knew what was going on, but I kind of didn't. To me, it was like a weekend getaway type deal. That's what I thought was happening. But little did I know it wasn't a weekend getaway. But yeah, I got literally hauled out of school, and I remember going there. And then I seen my biological dad at the airport. Me and my little brother. He took us to a house or an apartment, something. And I remember dropping my bag down, and there was another girl there, a little girl who was roughly my age. And that really confused me. And I was like, what is going on? And the only real memory I have up there with him is we went outside the house, and he was teaching me how to use a bow and arrow. And the only other memory I remember is when we had to leave again, he gave me a snow globe with a ballerina in it. And I still remember that. But those are the only two memories. But we were up there, I don't even know how long, but I know I wasn't in school when I was up there. But I was told later in life that the reason we had to fly back home was because apparently my mother threatened my biological father that she was going contacting the authorities for kidnapping. I remember then coming back home. When flying back home, it was very confusing. And then my uncle was there to pick us up at the airport, and we went to my grandparents on my mother's side, and that's where my mother was too. But I just remember that snow globe with ballerina. I held on to that really tight. And then everything just changed. I never seen my biological father anymore. My mother was upset. And I remember being in a room and hearing the word divorce, and that was all starting to happen. So my whole world that seemed so perfect was starting to fall apart. But no, my mother was very angry. And I went from like this happy child to very confused and feeling like the world just flipped upside down in a matter of a few days. Because apparently when we were up with my biological father, so we're going to flip back here now. I was saying earlier how my mother threatened to contact the authorities, so she was planning on contacting them and threatening for kidnapping, because apparently when she was in the hospital dealing with stuff, mental health stuff, that's when my grandmother on my father's side and my father came up with the idea of flying us up with him. And my brother and I went, but my sister apparently absolutely refused to go. So me and my brother went, and we went with my biological father. When we came back, like I said, it was a totally different atmosphere. I know divorce was being thrown around, that word. When we were at my grandparents on my mother's side, I remember I didn't really even see my grandparents on my biological father's side anymore, who I was so close with, and that just got ripped away. And my mother was saying a lot of negative things about my biological father. I just remember that. And like I said, it was just, everything just flipped. It was a crazy time for a 6-year-old to deal with, because at the time I was 6 years old. It was a lot, and it was heavy for a 6-year-old. And there was a way to go about it and a way not to go about it. And I honestly, looking back, I think the way my biological parents went about it was wrong. Now, I do recall one memory. One. I don't have a bunch. There was one that stands out, where my biological dad and my mother, when we were at our 2-story house, in the room, fighting, screaming at each other, yelling very loudly. And I remember my dollhouse had a piano that would play music, and I remember crawling under my bed and playing that piano just to try and drown out them screaming and yelling, and just hiding under the bed, and because I didn't want to get in trouble. I was like, they're screaming and yelling. And then I remember trying their door at one point, coming out and trying the door. It was locked, so I went back in under the bed again. And I just stayed there. And then after they were done yelling and screaming, I remember coming out and I seen the door was cracked. They were downstairs at this point, and I looked in and there was a hole on the wall, and this was before my biological father flew us up. So sorry if I'm like time jumping, but that's when I kind of knew something wasn't right. And I was only very small at that time, because when we came out of that situation and we ended up at my grandparents' house, my mother's parents' house, it was just a totally different atmosphere. And like I said, my mother she was out of sorts. And the sad thing is, even to this day, I don't have his side of the story of what happened. All I have and what I'm going on is my mother's side. So it's like, I don't know. But after that situation, I never did, and to this day, have never seen him since then. I don't know what else went down. I know that when they did go to court for divorce and custody, she's saying he didn't appear and he didn't show up. And part of me questions and is kind of confused about it all, because he went from somebody who, whenever he was home, he was a great dad and he would spend time with us. I do recall that. I remember him out cutting up meat and stuff after going on a hunt, and him and my grandfather out doing that, and I hated it. I didn't like it, but I just, seeing him at something like that fascinated me, but I didn't agree with it. That's just not my thing. Even to this day, I have native in me, but I don't like hunting. I don't. But I remember him taking us on the sled and pulling us across the frozen lake. It was just a lot of good memories when he was around. I don't have anything that reflects to me a negative. I can't say he was a bad dad, but my mother really tried to push it that he was like this monster. And I honestly, if anybody is watching this and you have kids and you're about to go into a situation of divorce or anything, please refrain from bashing that other parent or discussing things to your children, because it does negatively impact them. Because to this day, as a kid, that's all I seen. I seen him as the bad guy. I seen him as like a villain, because of everything my mother was saying, that he abandoned us, he left us, he didn't want us, he didn't want us kids, he didn't want her, and this, that, and the other thing, and it went on and on and on. Whereas now when I'm older, I'm looking back and I think about the memories. Okay, he never done anything negative to us. Yes, he was never around after, but what led up to that? I started to really think and question, and I remember one day just sitting down, and this was in my teens, and thinking, for somebody who went from wanting to fly his children off after my mother was dealing with some mental health stuff, and that's how she ended up in the hospital, and my biological father was up on the mainland working, and he flew us up with him. Now, I do believe there was an affair type situation involved there. I'm not 100% sure on that either, but I do know when going up with my biological father, as I stated earlier, there was a little girl there and there was a missus there, so, you know, she wasn't my mom, and this wasn't my sister. So, I know there was a lot behind the scenes. So for him just to stop, I'm wondering, is the whole threat made against him of calling the authorities something that deterred him, where there were other threats made that I'm not aware of that my mother had said to him, because I do know at one point he did. It was our first, there was an occasion, I don't know what it was or something, and I remember receiving a green teddy bear. No, sorry, it was a white teddy bear with a green bow on it, and something else. It was like a little computer, I guess, to start helping me to learn how to read and write, and it disappeared. I think my mother took it after I received it. A few days later, it was gone. And now I can't say for certain if my mother took it, because I don't know. I didn't physically see her, but I just know it disappeared. And I know that she was in a very negative and bad place mentally with him, and I remember that was gone. But even my grandparents, I was extremely close to them, and all of a sudden things just stopped. So I don't know. And like I said, as I got older, it's like I started to think, what went down then that I don't know, and to this day I still question it, that made him just stop communicating with his children that he was so in love and attached to? What was said or done? I still, and I know this will be something that will probably go to the grave with my mother, and but I feel like there's more. There's way more to this story that I don't know, and I wish I knew. But to this day, I can proudly say I never tried drinking. I never tried drugs. I never smoked. But I do know that it did change my perception of people. It makes me question people a lot more, not trust people as easily. I'm more closed off and more guarded because of this. And I think if it just was handled differently and everything else. But that's the thing with parents and divorce, especially when you were young, because they were both really young. I don't know. And that is today's Dear Diary. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was a bit eye-opening for some people, or anyone who's going through the situation right now of a potential divorce and children involved. Please refrain from talking negatively about the other parent. Please refrain from making the situation 10 times grander. It's like I said, I do recall and remember literally, it was just so fast. In my mind, I know it was over the span of a few days, maybe even weeks, but my memory just literally took it and went like it happened like this. So I don't know. I just remember going from a happy family in a 2-story dream home that seemed like the Barbie dream house to all of a sudden living with my grandparents on my mother's side, to her being very angry and bitter, and just in an environment that seemed very weird and awkward to me, because I did know kind of I did kind of know my mother's parents, but not very well, hardly at all. So it was really it was a weird atmosphere going into that house. And I just remember I had that snow globe, and we went up in the attic of my grandparents' house on my mother's side, and I was shaking it. My mother asked where I got it, and I said, Daddy gave it to me. And I remember going up in the attic, and she was going through old pictures and albums, and she was showing me like pictures of when she was a child and stuff like that, and like in her teens. And I remember she showed me this one picture when she was in her teens, and she had like a bob cut. And I remember I laid that snow globe on the dresser in the room that I was sleeping in my grandparents', and it disappeared. And that moment, I was so devastated, so upset. And I think that is where I don't have like a major obsession with snow globes, but I do have 3 or 4 that are very sentimental and very important to me. And I think that's all I have, are 3 or 4 that my husband gave me, and they mean everything. If everything in the house went, I'm okay, but those are the most important things to me right now, and I'm wondering if that is why, because that went missing and it was such an important and sentimental piece, and it was like the last thing I had that I held on to that was my father's, but it wasn't his, but it was the last thing he gave me. And it's so weird because it happened years and years ago, but it's the one thing I recall that really to this day bugs me where it went. And I can plant in my own head what I think happened, but I also cannot say to myself that's what happened, because I never physically seen or knew what happened to it. So I just know it disappeared, and I was devastated. And I know I laid it on the dresser that was in the room that I was staying in when we were living at the time at my grandparents', and it disappeared, and my heart just, I felt shattered. And like I said, as years went on, I'd still bring that up. Even when I met my husband, I remember bringing that story up of the snow globe and how it disappeared, and it was the last thing my biological father gave me, and I was devastated. And yeah, so that's the story of the start, I guess, of my parents' divorce. And yeah, thanks for watching if you watched. If you had a cup of tea with me, thank you. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for another video.